You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to Making Tracks, and a very special episode as we sit down with a number of fellow websites and podcasts to discuss Star Wars Visions, the first episode called Sith, with its creator and director, Rodrigo Blaas. It was a fantastic opportunity to talk all about the episode and asking questions about what is one of the most unique episodes ever filmed. So here is myself, representing Fantha Tracks, and a number of other outlets, speaking to Rodrigo Blaas about Star Wars Visions Volume 2's first episode, Sith.
Okay.
Hola, Rodrigo. Gustavo from Drive of the Force. Such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for this beautifully animated short. We loved it.
Thank you.
My question has to do with culture and representation. Down in Star Wars Celebration in London, at the press conference, you had mentioned how Pablo Picasso and John Miro were like inspirations for like the art style. And looking at the short, also we saw like the lightsaber hilt designs were clearly inspired by traditional Spanish rapier hilt designs. So like my question has to do with all of that. Like how did all of these pieces come together for the short? How did they inspire the story? And like what other aspects of Spanish culture did you pull from to create this story?
So the way I approach the again, and thank you for the compliments for sure. I'm very curious about the response on the short, but the way I approached this story was not so much from a cultural point of view, but almost like a personal. I felt like I grew up in Spain, so just by thinking of stories and trying to make that something that can be universal or can be understood all around the world and be part of Star Wars, but in that will be, culture will probably come out. What is great is, again, the team that I had was, is the leadership is from Spain, right? So, when we were getting these kind of references, they will pick it up very fast. I'm very fascinated. Our studio, we just opened a couple of years ago for the short, and we actually are very close to, the center of Madrid, where you can actually walk, almost like do a 5-minute walk and go from the Prado to the Reina Sofia. And you kind of see the history of art in front of your eyes in a walk, in a couple hours, right? You go from a very figurative, art form like Velázquez and Goya to a very, liberating Picasso and just seeing that almost like, I was thinking, okay, I get a chance to do this. I have a blank canvas. That is kind of what Lucasfilm offered in an amazing way, right? So I was like, okay, I'd love to connect part of that force through art to that kind of inspiration that happened, especially, in the 20th century, and how, we're very close, almost inspiration to Demoiselle d'Avignon, the famous Picasso painting, and how was one of the pioneers of abstract painting. So really, being able to graphically, pictorically push visuals and animation was, again, and at the same time, be respectful of the mythology of Star Wars, but be bold, right? There was a lot of connection there. So that's really one of the sources of inspiration. And of course, in the way you're when you're thinking of an hangar where Lola lives, well, you're looking at the rooftops of some of the cities in the center of Spain. When you're looking at the hilt, you go through the history of Spain and swordsmanship. So those are things that kind of started to come naturally into the narrative.
Sky Talkers is your turn right now. Thank you. Hi, I'm Charlotte from Sky Talkers. It's so great to talk with you today. I really enjoyed the short.
Thank you.
The droid E2 is such a great addition to the Star Wars droid family. How did his design come about?
So, I come from, my background is a character animator. So one of the first thing I wanted to really design when I got the call to make this short was, okay, you had that kind of bucket list of things you want to design. The droid came with this idea that usually, I kind of remember moments, right? And I always remember R2-D2, and when he was excited, he will do this kind of move where he just kind of almost jump, right? And it's so specific to make him emotional and actually transmit an emotion through that movement. So part of creating the design was like, okay, let's try to avoid rolling. So let's get him like this kind of spider-like little legs, so we can actually create very simple head tilts. I think the audience, part of the and this is the idea on the whole short, is like I wanted the audience to fill the gaps, like to connect the dots themselves and not give them all the answers, just have them in a journey of discovery. And the droid is we looked a lot at little dogs, almost like at puppies, and try to figure out these almost like, or also border collies. I always talk to the animators about, let's look at border collies and dogs that actually have this kind of shepherd feel, because the droid is there to kind of almost like protect. It feels like very specific about protecting Lola and like being aware of like, watch out. So those, creating that relationship through design but also through movement was super important, right?
Hi, this is Guy Henry, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks. Enjoy.
Talking Bay 94 is your turn right now.
Hi, Brandon from Talking Bay 94.
Yeah.
You mentioned filling in the gaps, and with these archetypal characters, it's very interesting to see them being placed in their story. Did you and your team discuss their backstories internally while you were building these characters, and how did that inform who they were on the screen?
That has been something that I've been thinking the last couple of years, even when I was writing the script, was this is almost like, and you've seen the short, like is a moment in time, is a culmination of a journey to two characters, right? Is a face-off, right? So for me, every line of dialogue, I wanted to imbue it with backstory, right? It's almost like everything there has to connect to a moment that these characters have lived through, because again, there is a dramatic learning experience in the way that I'm thinking about the Sith order, right, and how rigorous that education needs to be. It actually mimics, and that's I think part of the appeal of the Star Wars mythology, that it mimics some of the learning of history. And I think it was the way that it was connected and how we connect to it, because we see some similarities to kind of history, right? So part of that was always thinking like that must have been a dramatic escape or a dramatic breakup. So again, I started your ramble, and you start taking and thinking of unraveling and unwrapping the story, and that kind of like many of those choices in dialogue and moments come from that, from probably other encounters, and even from growing up learning about the Sith and having to choose a different path, right?
Nice turn of the Resistance broadcast.
Hi, Lacey from the Resistance broadcast. It's an honor to speak to you. This was one of my favorite ones.
Oh, thank you.
It's really cool. So there's so many shots throughout the story that kind of just stick with you even after the episode's over. For me, it's the shot of the Sith Master dragging the lightsaber down the hallway. It's just so beautiful. Are there any moments or shots that are your favorites?
I have a very specific moment, and in animation, especially in CG, there's a great team behind it, and many hands touch a shot, right? So that's one. There's one that actually I was there trying to connect the camera. Is the shot where is a shot of realization of Lola, right? From when she realized that darkness is part of the picture. This camera that is on her looks down. The camera, kind of tilts down, and then we see kind of the force, kind of the dark force in a way, and her controlling it through the arm, and then seeing the darkness expanding on the floor, and then lifting those dark bubbles of painting that we've seen before that she cannot control so much into like now fully realize. So we did a lot of back and forth. We changed the lighting from the beginning of her to afterwards to see that kind of resolution, enlightenment coming up. So moments like that are great. And I have one more, that is when the little droid discovers the little flower that is growing. It's one of these where like very, very specific, very a special moment when she, we kind of use the droid to actually change. Again, just witness, this kind of creation on painting, right?
Yeah, there's so many. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That's the radios, now your turn.
Hi, Rodrigo. I'm Nikki from Octa Radio. First of all, I just want to echo everyone else and say, the short is amazing and speaks so beautifully to a lot of the great Star Wars themes. But I wanted to ask you, because I'm curious about some of your previous work. Troll Hunters originally began development, I think, as a feature film, and then eventually lived with great acclaim on Netflix as an animated series, which I'm sure opened up all sorts of new storytelling avenues and different opportunities that you weren't expecting at the beginning.
Sure.
But I was wondering if you feel like Visions as a sort of project benefits artistically by being a series of shorts on a streaming platform, or do you feel like any of these, any episode from Volume 1, Volume 2 could be just as effective as a feature film? And then I guess by extension, what do you feel like is possible for Star Wars in an animated realm?
That's a great question. I think, again, I really love how Star Wars Vision came together, right? And what the Lucasfilm team is kind of doing with it, right? Is actually, making it a safe space in a way that let, creators bring this different point of view, a prism, almost like of what that Star Wars mythology that has been a long time with us, right? And how you can use that to bring different stories. I think that's, is part of the richness of the mythology and what it actually lets the creators do in a way, right? And write is part of what I think is again, it's very specific to that, right? I think, because and I can tell you about my journey, not about some of the, and I'm very excited about the other creators and what are they creating with different mediums too, like, how also Visions is not narratively giving something new and actually creating that sandbox to play, but also actually experiment visually in animation, right? So I think that is not something that is, it's hard to see, right, in studios that, that have to really, kind of place a bet on an animation show. That's what is great, is like, you're getting this, excitement of, okay, let's use actually this, anthology just to push different boundaries, right? For me was, okay, in the way that I was thinking of Sith, it can live in a Star Wars world, right? I was thinking more prequels in a way, like far away, that kind of medieval time that they talk about. But I always thought, like, there's, if that those kind of moments could be part of the source of this, right? Of this show, of these characters. But I want to think that way, right? I think, that's the way that probably someone else did more of a contained story. But again, that's what mythology, well thought out and visually simple mythology does. It lays the groundwork for you to create structure, like, the classic mythologies that we still create stories from, right? In our world, right?
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Hi, if it wasn't so visually striking, I probably wouldn't ask this question, but did the visuals inspire the story, or did the story inspire the visuals? Because the visuals and the way they're used just seem so important in the broader story of the shorts.
Sure. I think for me it was a whole, right? I wanted to create a piece that, you had that reaction. It's like, where does this come from? Mostly because I do like when all, and again, I love that kind of when that happened in cinema, is when everything clicks. Because, again, short film, TV, it's a medium that actually is almost like a unity of different approaches, different mediums, right? So I really like when everything is used and every frame is supercharged with all of those things, right? The inspiration for the short kind of came from a couple of places. One, a little longer and have a little bit more of a longer gestation. That was myself wanting to play with a blank canvas and trying to bring color and bring these kind of, these connecting the dots through painting and finding, strong color palettes that actually visually you can stop the frame and actually it feels like an illustration, but in motion it feels like animation. One of these things where you cannot quite grasp, how it was done. And then narratively, the character of Lola came from, I've told that story before, but the idea of una mirada is called in Spanish. That is, it's a hard one to translate. It's like, a look or a gaze, or it's something that, my daughter, it was a little small moment that could have been, imperceptible, but during the pandemic, she wanted to get out of the house with flip-flops one of the first time we were leaving, and I'm kind of the typical dad is like, no, we're gonna get shoes, and all these type of things that you've thought in your mind. And then my daughter looked at me with different eyes that I've seen her before, when she was 10. And I realized that moment, like, there was wisdom on that look. There was a, almost like defy. There was so many things in that look that is like, it kind of switched my point of view of like how I saw her at that moment. And I realized, wow, okay, this is actually a different thing of what I've been experiencing before about, shepherding, your daughter or whatever, how you want to educate, right? So that actually was, again, a very strong, visceral moment that I wanted to, make, Lola part of it. In the short, it has happened before the short, but it is, but it's still that kind of, wanting to defy that, and create her own path and, journey, is part of that story too, right?
Full of Sith is now your turn.
Hey, this is Brian Young with Full of Sith. I wanted to ask about sort of the theme of the story. It makes a very strong statement, especially in a world where it seems like art is sort of valued less and less. You came out swinging with a really strong statement about how art is a path to finding the light in someone. And I'm wondering if you could just speak to that and where that came from and why you felt Star Wars was the place to do that, because I haven't seen something like this before.
That probably comes from again, I've been in the industry for a while, and I've been in development for a long time. So you get trained to get rejected, right? That's actually what if you want to make these kind of projects, you have to train yourself to be in that place. And you get a lot of comments. And there was one exec that told me very dismissively, it was like, "Oh, you want to do art?" in a long time ago, right? And that kind of always stayed with me. And I realized, well, this maybe is the great opportunity because they give you a blank canvas, and maybe that's actually where you can actually connect both. But it's interesting, right? These days, we live in definitely challenging times because it's hard to value or to put a value on something, right? It's hard to understand what is the value of something, right? And I still believe, like, you know, if it really hits your core emotionally, if there's a beauty to it, if there's, you know, a craft that, you know, a team has put into it, I really value those things, right? And I still think that is, like, you know, one of the highest values we can, you know, bring to a medium like animation. So that's always been very simple my approach, and I kind of like, this was the perfect opportunity to use, you know, Star Wars visions and actually bring, again, a different point of view, but always aiming to create, you know, visual value, visual protein, right, into it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. So.
Ooh, nice.
In the same order.
Perfect. So I go again. Thank you so much.
Yes.
So a question I really had that was really interesting for me, looking not just at your short, but like all of the shorts of Visions, is the treatment of the Sith. Traditionally in Star Wars, like the Sith are viewed as a binary of evil versus the Jedi, which are good. But Visions, especially season 2, volume 2, has given us a more nuanced approach of like what the dark side is and what the Sith is, and this short is very emblematic of that, especially with how the use of color and art to show like Lola's journey. So can you expand on that a little bit, like what your views on the Sith and the dark side is in reference to the character's journey in this episode?
Yeah, I think, you know, again, that's where the best, you know, villains or dark side, not to just simplify it, but the best characters that come out of that kind of dark side is when they have these kind of dichotomies, right? These kind of, you know, almost like there's ideas that you can connect to, but at the same time, you know, that they are, you know, they're not, you know, done from the right place, right? For me, I call it like, you know, more than shade of gray. In our short, we wanted to do shade of color, right? You know, I don't think is a, you know, is a duality. There's you know, one of the things that I like concept-wise in terms of, you know, my life, and I tried to add it to the short, was this idea that you can live many lives in one life, right? And you can make choices that, you know, confront you and not easy, but actually they will put you in a place where, like, you'll discover other things and meet other cool people, right? And I think part of this is what Lola does in the short, right? Is actually she wanted to find, you know, she made a choice, right? And a choice that has big consequences, right? Wherever you are, that, you know, that is a statement, and is, you know, a statement on her side of disobedience, right? And trying to, you know, move away from that Sith order, right? So I think, again, the audiences are becoming way more aware of these things. They actually are looking to understand that, because I do think we're going into a world where we're going to need to have these tools to understand what's coming, because it's like, you know, it's very, you know, these kind of, you know, choices or what is good, evil are very blurred these days, and actually we need to get into nuanced storytelling to understand, again, what is valuable, what is, like, you know, what is that journey that you have to, and the choices you have to make.
Hey, this is Lauren Mary Kim, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Now the last question by Sky Talkers.
Okay.
Hi, thanks so much. I have a question about how do you think Lola's story continues after the short, and if you have an inkling about where it heads?
Ooh, that's hard, because I only think a backstory. So I you know, but again, as a statement, and this is probably a spoiler right after, but it's this idea that, again, she was able to change the small home where she lived, right? And make it look, or make it, you know, a place that is kind of very gritty, and is hospital, like you can actually, you know, very rugged place into almost like a nice cocoon. And then at the end of the short, she actually is able to change almost planets, right? So again, that is kind of a big statement. It's hard to think farther down the line, but I like this line that she says, like, a more welcoming home, right? I think that is what I think, it's part of what you have to find in life, right? It's like, just, hey, if you're not liked in a place, maybe it's time to find a more welcoming place, and someone that I think it's kind of connected to the making of the short too, like coming to Spain, to Madrid, creating El Guiri Studios, and to make this short. I've kind of had a good team that I worked before, but there was another new talent and skills that actually came with those new people that actually really gave something special to this. So it's a great, that's what is a great journey. And I always think of the experiences of these projects as, not only the project in itself and when it comes out, but the experience that you go through making it, because you meet pretty interesting and amazing artists on the path, right? Okay. Okay. Any more? You guys? We can cut it out. Great. Okay.
I have a short one if there's time.
I'll do last one. Okay, let's do the last one.
Okay. I just wanted to specifically ask you about to cover again sort of the Sith Master's hilt, because I think it was really influenced by El Cid's Persona, I think. I was just wondering where the design process you decided to go there, and why specifically that sword.
So there's actually a lot of inspiration to those designs. I wanted to, again, there's a big history of sword making in Spain, right? And I wanted to, and again, I wanted to connect that to, I think, how Star Wars movies are crafts, and Star Wars in general. The artistry that is behind it, and is very nuanced, is very delicate. Everything is designed in a way that is, functional, but at the same time, there's a beauty to it. It feels used. So, I wanted to imbue that design with history in Sith, right? And the two things that are, the hilts are, different almost styles of swordmanship, right? It's one is more medieval, swashbuckle, right? That's kind of the master, and that's actually the medieval, tizona, right? The sword of El Cid. And then there's another one that was more of a rapier feel, but again, instead of making a rapier, I wanted to, imbue it with influences of what, again, George Lucas, probably some of the influences of the movies that are, Kurosawa movies and samurai movies, right? And that katana. So there's different places I wanted to, it felt right visually, but yeah, those hilts were, very specific at where those come from. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Making Tracks. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit FanthaTracks.com or check out the free Fantha Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@FanthaTracks.com. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fantha Tracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Fantha Tracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember, tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock UK, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. And check out our Fantha Tracks Radio Friday night rotation every Friday night at 7 p.m. UK time for new episodes of The Fantha from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks. And that's me done for this episode.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.